Funding for the 11th Hour is made possible by grants from the Robert Wood Johnson Jr. Charitable Trust, the Commonwealth Fund, the Carl C. Icahn Foundation, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, the Jacob Burns Foundation, and the members of 13.
If you have never seen someone you care about sicken and die because of AIDS, these numbers may seem abstract. In the 1980s, 5 million people were infected with the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. About 600,000 developed AIDS. About 300,000 have already died. Welcome to the 11th Hour. I'm Robert Lipsyte. The World Health Organization, the source of those numbers, say we are at a critical moment in the history of AIDS. To combat it, we need right now more scientific information, more medical care, and more voices out there raising public awareness. Voices like those of Dr. Matilda Krim, a leading research scientist and fundraiser. I'll be talking with her in a few minutes. And voices that build community through song, like those of the group Sons and Daughters.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we're there, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Yes, we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Yes, we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Yes, we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we're there.
We'll get there, a message of hope from Sons and Daughters, voices of AIDS activism. With the exception of a few journalists and a few scientists, such as Matilda Krim, spreading the word has mostly fallen to the voices of the gay community and the arts community, which earlier this month made another effort to raise the national consciousness and remind the government who they think should be leading the fight against a disease that has already killed so many American artists.
The death of a disco dancer, well, it happens a lot round here. And if you think peace is a common goal, that goes to show how little you know.
Art in itself has been profoundly influenced by this horrific plague that we're all involved in. And I think the plague itself cannot be minimized. It isn't only in the art world. It's everywhere.
And we felt perhaps that there was a way in which the language of art, which obviously is a very different language from the language we speak, the language of the streets, that could say something, not just to our small community, but to the general population about this AIDS crisis in which we find ourselves. And we decided to call it A Day Without Art.
Love, peace, and harmony. Oh, very nice, very nice, very nice, very nice. But maybe in the next world.
The banner is a symbolic gesture. Obviously, it's part of the gathering strength, I think, of awareness about the impact that AIDS is having on our society. And I think that this gathering awareness, perhaps, is forcing individuals and institutions to consider what their role is and what the impact of the disease can have.
Death of a disco dancer. Well, I'd rather not get involved. I never talk to my neighbor. I'd rather not get involved.
About 18 months ago, a group of 4 New York nonprofit arts professionals met, and we were discussing the issue of AIDS. And although we felt there had been extraordinary efforts done on the part of fundraising organizations like the Art Against AIDS and the American Foundation for AIDS Research, politicians had not really listened to the needs and wants and desires of people with AIDS.
I suppose the objective is to prompt the government into a more strenuous action, because it's really something that affects everybody. Both of those people with the disease, the future, the people that may get the disease, and also it's a drain on our society, and it's an epidemic.
I think the only thing is awareness. That's why this one day of awareness, 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 visibility, non-visibility. We take something away that you expect to find, but we also want people to look around them and think, to feel for the other person, the person next to them. Let's think about it and stop and listen.
Perhaps no single voice in the world has been as loud and successful as Dr. Matilda Krim in raising the awareness of AIDS and money for research. Dr. Krim is Swiss. She was a cancer research scientist at Sloan Kettering for 25 years and an early advocate of interferon as a cancer fighter. She's married to Arthur Krim, a multimillionaire movie executive and Democratic Party power broker. We spoke in their home on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, which is a command center for the group she founded, the American Foundation for AIDS Research, AMFAR. Dr. Krim, the World Health Organization has been talking about this as a critical time in the history of AIDS. Do you feel that's true?
It is a critical time because it's time to realize what is happening to the world with AIDS. And it's critical because we're at a kind of crossroad. We have still choices before us. We can either take action, support research, institute public education, intensive, consistent, and devote the resources needed to doing this work. And then we can hope to contain the epidemic and also start controlling it, because we are developing drugs that are suppressive of the virus that could conceivably also prevent or treat some of the opportunistic infections that kill people. Or we can continue to do business as usual, to regard this as another disease, like all the others, and not respond the way we ought to, and then risk really to end up with a catastrophe of unprecedented dimensions.
Mm-hmm. And that's the shadow over the 90s.
Absolutely. Well, the shadow is here already, and the 90s are certainly going to be much worse than the 80s. We know already, on the basis of the number of infected people, and knowing that all of them are at some point going to become ill. We know that in the 90s we're going to have 10 times more cases of AIDS than in the 80s, and that's for sure. Or just projecting on the past experience with the rate at which the cases of AIDS increase in numbers. The number of cases doubles each 18 months in this country, and in other countries doubles even faster.
Mm-hmm. The implication of having a choice is that you're hopeful that something really can be done.
Yes, because research has been very productive of results, considering that rational research has started only 5 years ago. You know, we could start it from the moment we knew the cause of this disease, we knew the enemy, and could start studying it and developing drugs specific against it, and also start developing preparations that could be useful as a vaccine eventually.
At this point where you can do nothing or do something, where are we? I mean, what do we really know now, and what can science do right now?
We know the cause, which is very important, and it's a single cause, which makes it a problem that from the scientific standpoint is easier to solve than cancer, which is a variety of diseases with very complex causes. With molecular biology and the fruits of the biological revolution over the last 20 years, we can study this virus in more detail. We have done so already. We know it better than most other viruses, in such detail that we can, in fact, design drugs that specifically would inhibit what we call a viral function, an enzyme, a protein, a gene that is specific to this virus, so that we could inhibit the virus and not the cells it infects. Very specifically, that would be the ideal treatment. We have the capability of doing this, but we're not doing it. There is only 1 or 2, perhaps, drug companies that have started research of that kind, on that kind of rational basis. What we have now is perhaps 1 or 2 drugs that are effective, not good enough though. One cannot take them for a long time because they induce toxicity, and also the virus finds a way around them, you know, adjusts.
Well, somehow you make it sound...
So we need more drugs.
You make it sound easy. You make it sound that there are really very specific things that can be done right now that are not being done.
But they require not only money, resources, but organization, coordination, you know, purposeful work by a large number of people with various expertise. We have nothing like this organized.
Where is this going to start? Washington and Geneva?
Well, there are 2 sites really for doing this. One is industry, and industry is really starting to think about it now that the number of future cases will be so large that AIDS has become a market, you know. The second source of this kind of leadership should be the NIH, our national research institution. But the NIH cannot do anything without means provided by Congress. And Congress cannot do anything unless the public requires it. And this is why it requires an awareness on the part of everybody of the danger and of the possibilities. And we don't have this yet. Mm-hmm. Most people still deny that this is a problem that should concern all of us.
Well, throwing it back to the public, I mean, there's this first level that would have to stimulate the Congress. What don't people know that can kill them? What don't people know that they need to know?
They don't want to know. It is too horrible to contemplate. And so there is a natural revulsion to facing the danger. In the same way, people don't like to think about the danger of 50,000 atomic bombs in this world, you know. Secondly, there are a large number of people already sick, already affected by this disease, but there is not much sympathy for them because we have had an irrational, moralistic, self-righteous response to it. And many people have said those who have this disease deserve it. They have brought it on themselves, which is, of course, ridiculous. But it has justified
Why do you say
denial.
It's ridiculous? Do you think it's just a fluke that it started
Because
in
it
the
has
homosexual
nothing
community?
to do with the homosexual community, really, when you think of it. Homosexuality has been with mankind and is as old as mankind, and it has never caused AIDS. AIDS is not caused by homosexuality. AIDS is caused by a virus. This virus came to this country through ports of entry that were its big bicoastal cities. It so happened that in those cities there were large gay communities. And the link is between the level of sexual activity and these communities because this virus is transmitted sexually and through blood. So when it reached either the gay community or the drug-abusing community, it found a way to spread within those communities very fast. Secondly, this virus does not cause disease immediately. There is a very long incubation period that can last, we know today, on average 9 years, but perhaps in some people 15 and 20 years. So that it spread in those two communities before we knew that it was here, that it existed. And this is why even today, despite the fact that the gay community has made enormous effort to educate its people, and they have become educated, they have changed their ways, the spread of the virus is down to virtually zero in that community today. But we're paying the price now. The cases of AIDS we see among them today are results of infections acquired 10 and 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's too late for many of them.
Do you think that the denial in the heterosexual community will cause the disease to spread within, I mean, because
absolutely.
People, you know, leading heterosexuals have said it will never break through.
Well, that's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. You know, viruses don't care about the sexual orientation of the people.
Is that what we're going to see in the 90s?
Of course, and we have predicted this, you know, that this would happen. It was not believed. Well, it's happening already. In fact, the group in which this virus is spreading the fastest at this moment are women, because originally it was mostly men who were infected because they were IV drug users, gay men, bisexual men, mostly men. Now we see a wave of infection in women, and because these are young women, sexually active women, therefore relatively young, also in childbearing age, so we see a spread of the infection in babies. And we have thousands of babies who are sick already in New York, on the East Coast, I should say, because it involves also New Jersey and other states of the East Coast. And we're going to see more of it very rapidly.
Yeah. Later in the program, we're going to have an essay by the artist David Wojnarowicz, who expresses his outrage at his lover's death and blames the church and state, one for not allowing the spread of safer sex information, the other for not allocating funds quickly.
He's right. We knew in 1982 that we were dealing with a venereal disease. We knew where it was at the time, which was in a relatively small group, a nucleus of people on the East and West Coast. There is an organization of gay physicians called Physicians for Human Rights who pleaded for help in 1982 and tried to educate its people, but without means. They were not given means by the government to do more. The Gay Men's Health Crisis of New York was founded then, pleaded for help from our mayor and did not get it. We missed an opportunity to educate the gay community then. They did it by themselves, by their bootstraps. So by the time they became effective, efficient at doing it, it was 1984, 1985, 1986. It was too late for
And the
many
same thing is
people.
going to be recapitulated in the heterosexual community.
We are repeating the
If you could
same
reach out
mistake.
very quickly, and what would you tell people to do? Heterosexual people, people who might not consider themselves part of the, you know, the either IV drug user or gay community.
Well, it's very simple. It's you say the same thing you say when for the prevention of any sexually transmitted disease. You say be careful with whom you have sexual relations. Try to cut down on the number of partners. Try to know somebody well, very well, before you undertake an intimate relationship, and then stick to one partner. And for a while, also practice safer sex, which is use condoms, and a lot of good sense, and learn how to use condoms.
You say for a while.
Yes, because if a relationship is really solid and is to last for a long time, then people should have themselves tested, which can be done very simply, anonymously, discreetly. And from then on, if they are really trusting, if they are trustworthy, and they promise each other faithfulness, then they don't need to use precautions anymore.
You make it sound very simple, which makes me wonder, is there some kind of larger meaning in the fact that we are not going ahead? That we are not taking either these, you know, specific personal precautions or the larger precautions, you know, through government?
The larger meaning. I think the larger meaning is that it is very difficult to overcome prejudice, the idea that certain people for what they are or what they do are more at risk than others. The second larger reality is that it's very difficult to face danger, to acknowledge it, and also that it is very difficult to change human behavior, particularly something as fundamental as sexual behavior. And it requires efforts on different levels.
Yeah. There seems something paradoxical in your fundraisers sometimes, which seem opulent and, you know, men in drag, entertaining, and yet out there, social workers talk about not being able to find people who will come and touch children and people with AIDS.
Well, to start with, our fundraisers show that people can touch, you know. We mix, and it's fun, and it's great. It's wonderful. I think there is something to be said about applauding the diversity in mankind, you know, it makes it more interesting. No, we don't cultivate opulence, but the public, you know, trusts certain people, and among them celebrities, people who enjoy prestige and recognition in society. And for these people, you need a certain standard of elegance and comfort, you know. And this is why fundraisers have a certain elegance and lavishness. It's not something that is done for any other reason than facilitating fundraising and public education and public attention.
Dr. Krim, the worst case scenario, if you and others are not listened to, what will happen in the 90s?
We will not be ready. We are going to see our hospital system suffer from a serious breakdown out of too much strain on nurses and physicians, economic bankruptcy, really. We're going to see a terrible tragedy develop in the third world too, you know. In certain areas of Africa, 10, 15, 20% of the total population is going to be sick in the next 10 years. And this is going to spread, of course, also to Asia. It will be a terrible problem in Europe, perhaps a little less severe than here, because in Europe there is national health insurance and right to treatments. But in this country, there will be such, it will be so shocking and so painful, because remember, we're going to lose young people and babies, not old people, as with cancer or heart disease. That it's likely to affect really our outlook on life, our feeling about life. It's going to be very, very painful. This is why we have to limit this problem to the extent we can.
Dr. Krim, let's hope that the other road is the road that's taken. Thank you very much for being with us. When artist David Wojnarowicz raised his voice in pain and outrage at watching a lover die in an art show catalog, the NEA considered withdrawing funds from the artist's space show, Witnesses Against Our Vanishing. Wojnarowicz speaks with his face concealed because he is afraid of being physically assaulted.
Because of the recent controversy over the nature of my writings in the artist space catalog, I felt it's much better not to have my face in public, thereby possibly putting myself in danger. My art essentially comes out of what my view of my environment is.
If I had $1 to spend for health care, I'd rather spend it on a baby or some innocent person with some defect or illness not of their own responsibility, not some person with AIDS, says the health care official on national television. And this is in the middle of an hour-long video, people dying on camera because they can't even afford the limited drugs available that might extend their lives. And I can't even remember what this official looked like because I reached him through the TV screen and ripped his face in half. And I was diagnosed with...
I experienced a great deal of rage in watching endless friends die, neighbors die, strangers die from this disease because of ignorance, and because of ignorance that's promoted by both the church and the government. In witnessing this and having recently been diagnosed myself with this virus, whatever work I've done in terms of art or writings or music or performance, it's always been informed by what's in my environment or what I experience as an American in this country, as a homosexual in this country.
If you want to stop AIDS, shoot the queer, says Governor of Texas on the radio, and his press secretary later claims that the governor was only joking and didn't know the microphone was turned on, and besides, they didn't think it had hurt his chances for re-elections anyways. And I wake up every morning in this killer machine called America, and I'm carrying this rage like a blood-filled egg, and there's a thin line between the inside and the outside, a thin line between thought and action, and that line is simply made up of blood and muscle and bone. And I'm waking up more and more from daydreams of tipping Amazonian blow darts in infected blood and spitting them at the exposed necklines of certain politicians or government healthcare officials, or those thinly disguised walking swastikas that wear religious garments over their murderous intentions, or those rabid strangers parading against AIDS clinics in the nightly news suburbs. There's a thin line, a very thin line between the inside and the outside. And I've been looking all my life.
And I think that in the next 10 years, when this epidemic fully unfolds, people in this country are going to realize that it's not a disease of a sexual orientation. It's not a disease with a moral code. And when people finally wake up and smell the amount of bodies that have collected as a result of this epidemic, and see their children dying and see themselves dying of this disease, that there will be an incredible amount of rage.
It's been murder on a daily basis for 8 long years, and we're expected to pay taxes to support this public and social murder, and we're expected to quietly and politely make house in this windstorm of murder. But I say there's certain politicians that better increase their security forces, and there's religious leaders and healthcare officials that had better get bigger dogs and higher fences and more complex security alarms to their homes. And queer bashers better start doing their work from inside howitzer tanks, because the thin line between the inside and outside is beginning to erode. And at the moment, I'm a 37-foot tall, 1,172-pound man inside this 6-foot body, and all I can feel is the pressure. All I can feel is the pressure and the need for release.
We leave you with the voices of sons and daughters. That's the 11th hour. I'm Robert Lipsyte.
No more dying, no more dying.
Freedom, oh freedom, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, without freedom I'll be buried in my grave, and go home to my Lord and be free. Freedom, 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 oh, freedom, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, without freedom I'll be buried in my grave, and go home to my Lord and be free. And go home to my Lord and be free. And go home to my Lord and be free.
Funding for the 11th hour is made possible by grants from the Robert Wood Johnson Jr. Charitable Trust, the Commonwealth Fund, the Carl C. Icahn Foundation, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, the Jacob Burns Foundation, and the members of 13.